a section where I write the list of providers. So who are all the doctors actually have a kiddo home sick today? So what's the name of their pediatrician? What's the name of the psychiatrist? Who's the speech therapist? If I have to call the school. Hi, thank you for having me for this presentation. I'm going to be talking about special needs planning. This is just an overview that puts into perspective all the different pieces that go into special needs planning. So the first piece that I'm going to do real quick is just tell you who I am. I'm Kathy. I am a certified special education teacher in Virginia, and I'm a licensed and certified behavior analyst. I met Kristen Carlton, who's another mom of two kiddos with disabilities, and we met and realized that there was a real need to explain to families how to do special needs planning. You know, a lot of families think of it as pieces. You know, if I get an ABLE account, if I get a special needs trust, and you kind of get all the things. But what we've really honed in on is that there's actually a strategy about how you put all of those things together and how they all work together to provide an overall plan. And the big driving force in any special needs plan is actually all of the advocacy that you need to do to help make sure those services are in place, and also that they are in place for a very long time, that the advocacy is really pushing and keeping an eye on those pieces and keeping them going for you and your family. People come into the special needs planning process at various stages of life. So this timeline is really showing that progression. We talk about stage 1, which is birth to age 3. At that time, often that's when people are starting to realize that there may be a disability. And so diagnoses, early intervention, early supports and services often take place at that time. So if you're in that stage, you're likely thinking, what do I need to do to be prepared and to support my loved one for their lifetime? Stage 2 is really age 3 to 17. So we're typically in schooling, education, which can involve accommodations. It can involve special education services through an individualized education plan, transition planning. So as we get into those early high school years, middle school and high school years, we start thinking about life beyond school and what that's going to look like. There's also opportunities within the schooling time to think about early vocational services, to think about Medicaid waivers, how we're going to apply for supplemental income or Social Security disability services, should those be needed. So we're in the midst of school and doing all of that advocacy, yet we're also preparing for adulthood. Stage 3, which is 17 all the way up through when parents retire, whoever those full-time caregivers are. At some point they are going to retire, right? So we're in this place where we're thinking about our loved one and their life, and we're having to think about the fact that we're not going to be able to work as parents, as the primary caregivers all the time, that at some point we're going to have to slow down as well. So there's a lot of transition planning during this time for both our loved one with a disability as well as for our own lives. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. And then stage 4 is really the rest of life. That's when I'm not here anymore for my two kiddos with disabilities. And so there's this period of time where they're going to be here without me. And what does that look like? Certainly all along this way, there are all kinds of supports and services that we're going to go into, but that just gives you a sense of how there are different things, that kind of key points and activities that happen along our life, that journey. And so again, one of the things that we realized as planners is, if you go to your financial advisor, they'll say, oh, hey, don't forget to do a will and get a trust, and, make sure we're incorporating that. Or if you're at the attorney, they say, hey, make sure you get some good financial advice. Or if you're talking to the school, they say, oh, hey, by the way, you need to look into vocational services or the Medicaid waiver in your program. So we get these like bits and pieces. And again, as parents or caregivers, we're like pulling it all together on our own. And so what we have found, and the system that we really like to share with people to use, is more of a strategy of what to do first, what to do next, and why, and then get to a place where you have the freedom to really even move beyond that. So what we're going to talk about today is what we call care, protect, grow. So there are three pieces that really all come together with your family and your loved one at the center of it. Excuse me, the care part, and I'll go into details, but at the high level, it's really about the financial planning, the supports and services, and those public benefits. So care really means when we're in the day-to-day, when we are taking our loved one wherever it is that they need to go, we're here in and out, we're in the thick of it all the time. This is, okay, well, what do we need to do to really manage this and to make sure we've got everything in place, the support that's here, so that it does help to support our loved one now, but it's also going to pay off in the future. So that's where we have to get into special needs financial planning. And part of that financial planning is thinking about, does the Medicaid waiver make sense, not only from a service and support perspective, but also from a financial perspective? Same thing with Social Security. Does this make sense? Is my loved one going to be able to work enough? Are they going to need that income support for their lifetime? So we're going to sort all that out. And then once we understand our financial pathways, both for myself as the parent who's going to have to slow down and not work as much at some point, and then also for my loved one who is building their financial future, how do we actually protect all of that and create a pathway? That's where all of those legal protections come in. That's when we want to do the special needs trust. We actually don't recommend necessarily doing that first, but rather thinking about all the financial pieces of first, and then building the legal framework and documents around that and creating the pathway, explaining how all of that is going to flow. And certainly when we have public benefits, we have to shield our loved ones from any assets. So that's why special needs trusts and things like that come into play. But at the same time, protect is also about, are there going to be enough resources there? That stage 4, when I'm not here anymore, and I'm not an earner, and I'm not collecting Social Security myself because I'm not here, where are the financial resources coming from? So we might be thinking about things like life insurance to fill those future gaps. And then tax efficiency. Not only do we have certain write-offs that we can make or take advantage of in order to maximize the resources that we have, but we actually need to put tax terminology, tax information, tax efficiencies, tax guidance into those legal documents. And again, we can't really do that until we understand the financial pieces, which is why we sort that out in the care section first. So we do the care, we wrap it up and protect it, and now time to grow. So now we really want to think about, okay, what do our investments look like? How are those working to support, myself into my retirement as well as my loved one? What are my personal goals? As things start to get settled, maybe I can imagine traveling, or maybe I can imagine joining a club or working part-time or slowing down a little bit. So I'm going to go through all of those different stages. And I find that sometimes it's helpful to do that when you think of an example. So we've got the Smith family. We're going to be really general here. So we've got Sam here, who is a young adult with autism and a genesis of the corpus callosum. So he has both a medical condition as well as a developmental diagnosis of autism. He does work part-time at a local grocery store. He also has created an ABLE account, which we'll talk about. He is receiving Medicaid. He does live in a little apartment within his parents' home, and he also receives supplemental income. Jana and George, Sam's parents, they are providing a lot of support to George. To Sam. George and Jana, Sam works and he's got some level of independence, but they do find they need to drive him to work. They do find that, Sam really only leaves the house to go to work. He doesn't really have a social network of support. And Sam does continue to have some care needs. So even though he's gotten older and he is working a little bit. He needs a lot of help with his haircuts, a lot of help with cutting his nails. So mom and dad are pretty aware that, yeah, it's great. He's done a lot. He's got a lot of benefits in place, but he has still quite a few support needs that really today still mom and dad are still providing. So that's something to sort of put up here and think about. So kind of pause that little scenario there for a second and let's talk about the care portion. Remember, that is financial planning, and financial planning is really looking at the cost of care and how we can meet those costs of care, and whether public benefits like Medicaid waiver and Social Security should be a part of that. It's also looking at documenting all of the care needs. So I'm actually going to start there because I think as parents, that's what we worry about. If I, can't, if I'm not here and somebody has to step into my shoes, I don't know how to explain to you like quickly what I do on a daily basis. So rather, we really work to help families to develop a care plan. And this is certainly something you can do yourself just with a basic Word doc that you share with others digitally, or that you keep stored in a cloud, or however it is that you do that. But what this is it's really taking everything you have in your head about day-to-day care and putting that onto paper. And the framework we want you to think about is think of it as like a bit of a checklist or schedule of activities. So what happens the moment my loved one gets up in the morning to the time they go to bed at the end of the day? And then overnight while they're sleeping, what kind of support do they need? And then how does a weekday look a little bit different than a weekend? Like, for example, with Sam, our family here, when Sam goes to work, what does that morning, afternoon, evening, bedtime routine look like? But what does it look like on his days off? And is there anything different about the weekend, maybe when the family is all together, when none of them potentially are working? So we want to just draft this down. So when I'm making my checklist, it usually says, like 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I want to list the activity. I want to list the support that's needed at that time. And then I like to leave a little space for a checklist. Because again, if I have to hand this to my sister and she's coming over here to take care of my kiddos, she can kind of keep track. Okay, I got Ethan up. And I gave him his medication because he needs to really take it first before he does anything else. And, like she would know the order of events pretty easily and be able to make some notes, like, hey, I gave Ethan his medicine, but then maybe he threw up or something. I hate to be gross, but maybe something happened that we need to note after that. So, I like to write it up as a checklist. So I get through the days, I note, I might have a whole nother section that's just about the weekend or days off and what that looks like. And then I have a section where I write the list of providers. So who are all the doctors actually have a kiddo home sick today? So what's the name of their pediatrician? What's the name of the psychiatrist? Who's the speech therapist? If I have to call the school, who am I calling? Like I know when, for example, this morning, when Andy couldn't go to school today, I had to email 3 different people at the school to notify them. I had to use an app on my phone to contact his after-school program to let them know that he wouldn't be there as well. So there are like 4 people that have to know today that Andy is not going to be at school. So, and again, that after-school program, that's an app. You actually can't really call them. They have a number, but you're not going to get the right person. So some of these things, again, how do I explain that to you? Well, I'm going to explain it to you in the care plan. And this is the kind of activity, when I do this with the family, it usually takes a little over an hour to get started. And then we have a moment where we review it. Then I draft it, I write it all up. I send it to them to review, and then we have another meeting to go over it. So it's several meetings. I'd say a total of about 5 hours to get this on paper, but then it's done. And then we just put a day on the schedule every year where we go back and review it. Any updates, any doctors change, anything in the routine? Maybe we're going to high school now instead of middle school. Maybe we're an adult and we have a new job. Whatever it is, it's much easier to put those changes into the care plan document once you've just done it. So commit to that this year, get it all out of your head. onto paper, not real paper, but digitally, and be in a position to share that with people. And when I get to the legal, the protection, we'll talk about how we're going to do that. So the care plan is huge. And then we want to talk about services and advocacy, and that's where I'm going to get into government benefits. So first, quick pause is that when we're thinking about our loved one, first we have to think about, are they getting the supports and services they need? So it might be that you have a school-aged loved one and maybe you're a little worried about special education services. Maybe you're getting or needing accommodations. Maybe you're wanting access to additional therapies. I have families I work with that need medical plans at school, due to a seizure disorder or other health concerns, a health plan, a health support plan for the school. So, we want to make sure we're getting all of those pieces into place and that we've got the advocacy behind that. It might be something you, caregiver, parent, who's in the day-to-day, you may find it hard to get some of this going. Make the time, get an advocate if you need to. We always say schedule that IEP meeting. Hey, I'm really worried about my loved one. I want to have this discussion. It is your right.
My tongue hurts.
Okay.
Because I bite it.
Sorry, I had a little time out there because I am home with a sick kiddo. So he came in and interrupted me real quick. But what I was trying to say is that as you find yourself needing services, you can consult with people. You can talk and have that conversation. If you have that thought of, well, gosh, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there, or there are recreational activities, and I don't know which one to choose. I would just say be intentional about it and say, okay, today's the day I'm finding something. Like, for example, it's only the end of January, but I'm thinking about, my son is going to be volunteering this summer, but I have to figure out where that's going to be. And I just have it actually marked on my calendar. Like, these are the 2 hours I'm giving myself to figure out, what this is going to look like. I think we have to do that, just like our jobs and our other commitments as parents who are super, super busy. We have to carve out that time, and that's okay to do that. To say, I'm going to commit to resolving this issue and finding more resources. Most health insurance plans have an advocate built in. Someone can help you talk through services. Your community services board is someone who can also help you think about that.
Mom.
Yep, my kiddo. Sorry about that. So I just am saying be intentional about trying to do that to get services. One of the things, particularly as individuals with disabilities get older, is that the Medicaid waiver system is designed to really provide a lot of supports and services. There was a period of time in our history in which individuals with disabilities were often in institutions. They were really more secluded and needing to go somewhere to receive the supports they needed. And in recent decades, that's really been reversed to say, actually, services need to be provided in the community and in their homes. And so these Medicaid waiver programs are the mechanism that has really allowed that to happen. And so sometimes services, like somebody coming into my home and helping my child, or somebody taking my child into the community, or for adults, the ability to go to a day support program or live in a supported living community. Those options and services are provided and funded through Medicaid waiver programs. And so there's two pieces to that. One, they're accessed often through the Medicaid waiver program, but then that also means that providers are contracted and have agreements with Medicaid waivers. So Medicaid waiver programs end up becoming something that's super helpful, but also something that's pretty essential, because if I need those supports and services that really are only provided through Medicaid waiver programs, then I really need to have a Medicaid waiver in order to get those. Sometimes folks will say, well, I don't know if we're going to need a Medicaid waiver. I'm going to wait and see. And they don't realize that there are tremendous wait lists for these programs because they're providing these services to such a large number of people. So we just really encourage you to apply for them and to get on those wait lists. and to seek those services. Because once you are in that situation of, okay, I want my loved one to live in a supported community, or maybe they're going to need group home services or case management, whatever it is, you might have difficulty finding those services without the Medicaid waiver. So that's something to think about. And also supplemental or Social Security. So Social Security is a traditional system, is something that by way of us working, we're paying into our Social Security retirement. But Social Security also provides supplemental income and also disability. And so what has been shown is that individuals really need to apply for Social Security between the ages of 18 and 22. This is where during those ages, we typically have a lot of rich information, and we're able to show and we have documentation that the disability our loved one has occurred when they were a child, that it is a lifelong disability, that it hasn't occurred suddenly as an adult, but rather has been present throughout the childhood. And once our individual has applied and is in the Social Security system, when we retire, so when I retire and draw on my Social Security benefit, if my child is already in the system, they're going to be eligible for what's called a disabled adult child, or DAC benefit. I fully expect my son to work in some capacity. But I'm not sure what that's going to look like right now. I don't know, given his difficulties with attention, impulse control, social interactions, and a number of other things, like what that is really going to look like for him. And I also don't know if he's going to be able to work enough to cover his expenses. So he may qualify for Social Security by way of his disability through a disability determination when he turns 18. And so he gets approved and enters into the system and starts receiving some Social Security income. Yet, let's say my son suddenly starts working or is working a little bit, the system is meant to adjust based on the income that my son is receiving. Yet again, once he's in that system, and then here I am, age 67, 70, pulling my Social Security retirement benefit, will then allow him to be disabled for that disabled adult child benefit, which is where he's going to draw on my record and increase the amount of support that he's getting. So some of these government benefits, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes right now it may be hard to imagine or know whether or not your loved one's going to need them, but there are some entry points that are important to think about because you may need those services. And so there's some reasons to do things, as I said, in a certain order or at a certain time. And then, of course, all of this to say, this is all what we're doing to incorporate what do we need in this overall financial plan. The other thing that I haven't talked enough about is the lifetime cost of care. So there's actually a way to look at the kinds of unpaid supports that you're providing as a parent or caregiver to the individual with a disability that are ultimately, when you're not doing all that free labor, someone is going to have to, right? So that example of Sam needs help getting his nails cut. He's not going to the salon right now. Mom and dad are doing that for him. If mom and dad don't do that and his nails are still growing and need to be cut, who's doing that? What does that cost? What amount of time is going to be needed for that, and on what frequency? So we can take all of those things, driving Sam to work or getting Sam to work, helping to support him at home, finding recreational and social opportunities for him, maintaining his home. All of the things that Sam's parents are doing for him right now, if they weren't doing them, plugging somebody else in their place is going to have a cost to it. So we can actually go through an exercise where, in addition, that care plan has spelled out the day-to-day activities. We can actually get a sense of the paid costs associated with all those efforts, and then end up getting a monthly cost of care, an annual cost of care, and then calculate that out to a lifetime cost of care. So now suddenly imagine being able to predict, gosh, this is what it costs. But that's really what we do when we're thinking about our own retirement. We think, okay, my budget is X a month. And if I'm going to keep living like this, I'm going to need my retirement to look like X. And this is where some people kind of change their lifestyle when they retire, right? Their budget's like going down a little bit. It's a little diminished. But we can do this same exercise for somebody with a disability by just looking at and quantifying the kind of support that they're getting. So for so many reasons, that's an important exercise, because now I can think about for myself, okay, this is what I'm going to need in my retirement to keep going. And then these are the resources my son is going to need. And how do, I can now plan for 2 generations, have some funds there and figure out, okay, well, how am I covering all those costs? And then we can kind of back in with all of these different supports. A few others that I want to touch on. I mentioned the waiver. I do want to make sure you all know the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services operates the North Carolina Medicaid program. 2 main ones, community alternatives and the innovations waiver for supported living. So the waiver is really designed to provide both in-home support, so somebody coming into the home to do supportive things, to help somebody out based on their service goals and support goals. But then there's also community activities and access to community activities. Innovations waiver and supported living. Supported living is saying, hey, you're going to live in your own home and supports are going to come in and be on call as needed. So there's someone who's really out there to monitor, be contacted in an emergency service. When I say try not to fit in, work to build supports around you, sometimes I'll find parents looking at a list of services and trying to say, okay, I need, like it's a shopping list. Okay, well, I want this service, I want that service. Try not to fit yourself into it when you're reaching out and you have your intake with the Medicaid waiver programs. Think about, go into it not saying, what can I have, but rather, here's what I need. My loved one needs assistance with getting their nails cut, needs transportation to work, really can't live on their own. Somebody needs to be there or be very close by to provide support. We want to go in talking about your needs, and it's really the work of the agency and the case manager to say, okay, well, these are the supports and services we would recommend putting into place around that. That takes some advocacy and some work around that. Also, through that same Department of Health and Human Services, the Disability Determination Program exists. So in the Social Security Autism Office, and through the Health and Human Services Department, you can go through a disability determination. So what that means is that when we're thinking about applying for Social Security benefits between that 18 and 22 time frame, and this is for disabilities. So some of you, as your families may be receiving Social Security income based on your income level as a family. What I'm talking about here is totally separate. I'm talking about your loved one who's 18 or older, who's going to need that additional income and resource because of their disability and inability to work enough to cover their living expenses. So in order to determine that, you have to go through a disability determination. And then there's several different ways that, as I mentioned, to get some supplemental disability income, as well as in the future, that disabled adult child benefit. So it starts there with that disability determination. Spotlight on the ABLE, as we mentioned, Sam has an ABLE account. So when he does work, he's actually direct depositing his paycheck into his ABLE checking account. So what's great here, there are tax benefits in terms of this money is not taxed when if somebody wants to contribute to the ABLE, like his parents want to maybe make some monthly contributions to it, they can't exceed $19,000 a year. And they are not, that is a gift to him. So, and the most important thing here, ABLE was really designed to not impact Sam's government benefits. So Sam's getting Social Security, Sam is getting Medicaid. And so what the ABLE is saying is, hey, those resource limits that Social Security and Medicaid put on you, the ABLE is allowing you to exceed those limits and it not penalize your restrictions in the Social Security and Medicaid programs. However, there is a limit. ABLE right now cannot go above $100,000 in total, or then it will. So there is a limit. It's important to say that because your ABLE account won't kind of knock on your door and go like, hey, you're almost at 100,000, watch out. It's something that you really have to monitor. So keep that in mind. That's a great program. Your North Carolina ABLE does allow you to invest. You can choose different investment options for your ABLE account. It allows you to save up to 100,000. It's a checking account, and you will also have an debit card that you can use for just going out and shopping for any disability qualified expenses. We really think of the ABLE account as your day-to-day spending. So you may also, as a parent or caregiver, think, okay, well, I'm going to have a special needs trust and we're going to fund that. It's a little harder because your trustee is managing that. Whereas the ABLE, Sam is going to drive this. You can have a representative assisting you with your ABLE account. That's not a problem at all if that's needed. And just again, with that debit card, it's so much easier. Imagine if I took my son shopping and we took that ABLE debit card and he could pick out the things he wants and go to the register and buy it, but I'm kind of like monitoring and making sure he's okay with that. That's what's really great about it. And then hopefully he can learn the skill to go on his own and do that. So again, to really kind of wrap up the care portion, we want that cost of care. We want that care plan. We want to think about your lifetime because we're going to have to pay for your lifetime and also your loved one's lifetime. And then this is telling us if there are any gaps, and that's going to pull us into the protect section. So for Sam, just to wrap up that example, we wrote down in his care plan his daily needs. We realized the unpaid supports and we calculated that for Jana. So we're able to get a sense of what his exact needs are and where she was really plugging in. Sam did have the disability determination. So he is through that Social Security process, which is great. He is on the waiver wait list. And so some advocacy is needed to really make sure his case manager knows just how important it is that he hurry up and get that waiver. And they also established a financial plan to really help Janet and George understand that they can retire at their target age, which is 65. And they have confidence also in knowing that the supported living services through the waiver are going to allow Sam to live independently. So now we want to wrap that all up in our protect plan, which is where for insurance, this is where we're going to address gaps. So when we did that cost of care with Sam, or if you do it with your own loved one, there's going to probably be some amount of money that's needed. And if you're not working and you're not drawing on your retirement because you're not here, that is a cost that's going to have to be addressed. So we can think about things like a whole life insurance policy. We also want to think about things like long-term care, because when I think about myself, and if many Americans need some level of long-term care, I have to kind of plan for that. I can't plan all these supports for my loved ones with disabilities and then expect that someone's going to help me if I need some help. You know, we all are going to need the help. So there are some great long-term care programs. There's also a lot of insurance that has convertible options. The sooner you do these kinds of things, the better. We want to think about looking at tax-advantaged retirement and investment opportunities. And we also want to wrap things up into legal documents, which I'm going to talk about. If you have a child, a minor, you have to have a will. You really want to designate who's going to step in your absence. You want that power and control, and you want to have that choice, or at least designate who's going to make that choice. Power of attorney is where we really have someone helping to make decisions for us in the event that we're incapacitated. And if you have a loved one who's an adult, the same thing applies. You know, you want your adult loved one, if they have the ability to consent, to designate you as their power of attorney. If your loved one is going to need some help making decisions, there are different options. Kind of from the most restrictive is guardianship or conservatorship. So that's where you really are, the court would actually deem the individual with a disability as incompetent and unable to make their own decisions, and that they are requiring someone else to make decisions on their behalf and in their interest. That is a whole process. It's a process that you really want to take time and consideration to see if it makes sense for that individual. The other option is to do power of attorney. Again, you have to consent. So if your loved one, when they turn 18, can consent to that, understands what that means, you can have them designate you as power of attorney, which allows you to assist in their financial and legal matters and support. Supported decision-making is getting a ton of traction. It's a wonderful option. A lot of people do power of attorney and supported decision making. Supported decision making is a process whereby somebody designates people in certain categories. So they might say, hey, I want Kathy to help me with my advocacy. I want John to help me with my legal needs. I want Barbara to help me with my financial. And it's an agreement that's written out, could certainly be notarized. And any of these documents, when you have them, you got to hand them to people. You go to your doctor, you like make sure they have copies of it. Your bank, make sure you're really intentionally informing people. And then, of course, my favorite thing is a microboard, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And then special needs trusts. Special needs trusts are entities. And so what we're doing is we're basically taking assets, so funds, property, things like that, and we're titling them or designating them to a special needs trust for the benefit of our loved one with a disability. And this shields them from those assets directly because, again, in order for them to get Medicaid waivers, Social Security, they can't have a certain level of assets, but we can designate things over here to this special needs trust and they can benefit them that way. So that's how a special needs trust is written. So for example, my retirement accounts, the deed on my house, things like that are designated to the trust, the special needs trust, and then I've designated a trustee to administer and oversee those assets for their benefit. And I've written into the trust, hey, really important that they have a place to live, really important that they have access to services and that they're living their best lives, etc. And again, the microboard I'm about to tell you about is really an additional way to help ensure that happens. You want to make sure you have trained attorneys in elder law who can create and establish these documents. You don't want your cousin who, does, some sort of practices law, I don't know, whatever over here that's not relevant. You really want someone who has a specific training and has done this in your state. A family trust is a revocable trust that can be changed, but if you have a loved one with a disability, but maybe you have other children that don't have disabilities, having a family trust where all of the assets can go and then they can be distributed to the children so that assets, instead of going directly to the disabled child, they're going to their special needs trust, but then they could go directly to the other individuals. So special needs trusts, there's two types, first party and third party. There's also community trust or what's called a pooled trust. A first party trust is created and funded by the individual with a disability. So a lot of times when you see somebody like maybe they have a car accident and suddenly they get a big settlement and they have to go and create a trust and it's immediately funded by that individual who had the issue. That's why it's called first party trust. Those are typically subject to payback. So if there's a first party trust in place and the individual is accessing Medicaid, it could be that the first party trust, if there's anything remaining in it, that it would get clawed back by Medicaid if Medicaid was used. A third party trust is, again, it's created by a third party like me creating a special needs trust for my son. So my son didn't have to create it. He's not putting any funds in it. I'm creating it for him. So it's a third party. The other bit, what's really nice about a third party trust is it can have beneficiaries. So should I put a trust together and I fund it with all my assets and my son pass away, I could have a contingent beneficiary that says, well, if he's not here, I really want the remainder funds to go to, St. Gerard. So you could do things like that too, so that there is you can do those beneficiaries, which is really nice. So what a microboard does, so think about a fantastic IEP team or a group of people who are coming together on behalf of somebody with a disability. So all of those people that said, hey, I'd love to help, but I'm not sure how, or, let me know if you need something. The people that you wouldn't necessarily expect to fully take care of your loved one, but they could help out in some capacity. Well, they could sit on your microboard. So just like a nonprofit organization, a microboard is a team of directors. And this is a legal entity that's registered in your state, although we do not suggest that it hold any funds. It doesn't have guardianship. It doesn't have legal power, but it's a group of advocacy. And by way of making it very legitimate and registering it and organizing it with articles of incorporation and bylaws, you give the people that are on it the structure. of how to have discussions about your loved one, how to be advocates. So this is such a great thing to do. It's great to start early because it takes you a little while to build that team of advocates. And also once you have it, of course, as people age, you're going to want to put some more people on. So but that microboard can really serve to pull all of these pieces together, really helping to make sure that your loved one's decisions are supported, making sure those legal documents are acting in the way that they're intending. It's really protective of all of this. And the reason why we're lumping it in here is because you're really going to want to talk about it in those legal documents. You're going to want your special needs trust document to mention, hey, we take advice from a microboard. You're going to want your microboard bylaws and articles to say, hey, we give advice to the special needs trustee, all that good stuff. So that's why, again, timing and strategy can be really, really helpful here. So again, it's a formal circle of support. We suggest you do it formally so that you have some great structure behind it. And the microboard is going to become expert in that care plan. So maybe they can't step in and be the person on call, but they get it. They're now informed. I mean, how many of the people don't really know what your day-to-day is like? You're really changing that with this process, but you're changing it in a way without putting such a big ask on them. Like, hey, can you come to a microboard meeting 4 times a year? Can you just come and listen and talk with me about my loved one? And we're going to do that 4 times a year for a lot of years, and one day I'm really going to need your advice. I'm going to want to talk through something, and you're going to be so equipped and ready to do that. Okay, so those are all the pieces of the decision-making support. And again, coming back to the Smith family, they wanted to get the survivorship policy for Sam's Special Needs Trust, and they wanted to look at how they could take some better tax deductions, medical deductions for the out-of-pocket support. They updated all of their, legal documents, and they really established that microboard for Sam to help put all of those pieces together. So the last section is actually like the super fun section because we've just done all the work and the care and protect. So now you can really start to think about investments. How do I need to grow my funding to support my loved one and also take care of my needs? What are some goals that maybe I haven't been thinking I can do, but maybe now more realistic now that services, supports, and planning is actually in place. So one of the things that we talk about is more of a dividend strategy for investment. So this is something we could talk to you in detail about if you have any questions, but there are a lot of different ways to think about investments. And traditionally, folks are thinking about how to really maximize investments, but dividends offer a unique opportunity to allow regular funding to come to you in your retirement, yet protecting the principal that you're going to leave behind to the trust and the benefit of your loved one with a disability. So it's a unique strategy that we'd be happy to talk to you about in light of your own personal situation. So for Sam, that dividend strategy did just that. It allowed his parents to get the monthly income that they needed in their retirement and preserved that principal for Sam's benefit. And again, all of these supports and services they got in place with the Medicaid waiver and supported living allowed the parents to, Jana was providing all that unpaid support. Now she's a little freed up of that and able to really indulge in some of her goals. Again, as I mentioned, we're a team, we're all moms, we all have kids with disabilities. We do this planning and we love this planning. We have a process whereby we meet with families and establish and create plans for them. And then it's your choice if you'd like us to execute the plan or if you would like to take the plan and work with your own team, however you like to do that. We're always happy to meet with folks. So if that is something that's of interest to you, my email is there, Kathy@allneedsplanning.com. That is our main number. So often myself or Charlene, our assistant, will answer that, and she is very happy to help you. So I thank you all for your time on this presentation and look forward to helping you out and answering any questions you may have about this. We're parents and we want to help other parents get this done. So thanks very much.